August 27, 2005. Category 3 Hurricane Katrina slams into New Orleans, killing over 1,836 people and causing more than $81.2 billion in property damage. But it would have been much worse if not for the information collected about the storm by this innovation. The information collected by the airplanes that flew into Hurricane Katrina in the hours it was offshore allowed forecasters to build computer models and predict the storm's path, all in time to warn everybody to evacuate. This saved thousands of lives. The use of airplanes to fly into hurricanes by forecasters saves lives by allowing forecasters to report the location, size, intensity, direction, and speed of hurricanes out of reach of land-based monitoring devices. In 1900, a Category 4 hurricane devastated Galveston, Texas. Forecasters tracked the storm over Cuba, but after the storm passed over the island, they did not have any reports about its whereabouts. When forecasters were tracking the winds and waves at land, they couldn't tell the difference between small storms close to shore and large storms out at sea. Galveston was struck with little warning. In 1903, the steamship New York in the western Atlantic provided the first ocean-based weather report to forecasters using the radio. Using ships and radio was valuable in saving lives and property at sea and on land. However, the efficiency of radio reporting led to new challenges. As detailed in the book Hurricane Hunters by Ivan Ray Tannehill, a former chief of the Forecast Division in the United States Weather Bureau, writes, "Vessel masters at sea soon learned that it was dangerous to be caught in the line of predicted path of a hurricane, and when warning was received by radio, they steamed out of the line of peril as quickly as possible." Thus, as the storm advanced, fewer and fewer ships were in a position to make useful reports, and in a day or two, the hurricane was said to be lost. That is, there were too few reports to spot the center accurately, or in some cases, there were no reports at all. The storm hunters could only place it vaguely somewhere in a large ocean area. When it was impossible to track the center of a hurricane accurately, it is impossible to issue accurate warnings. This led to several disasters. One, in 1928, a big hurricane swept across the Atlantic and devastated southern Florida, leading to the loss of 2,000 lives near Lake Okeechobee. When irate congressmen and senators representing Gulf Coast states protested in Washington, D.C., the president authorized the use of the U.S. Coast Guard to sail ships into the path of approaching hurricanes. While this was attempted from 1938 to 1940, forecasters had little information on the location and direction of the storm to give the ship's captains information on where to travel. Plus, the size of the seas prevented ships to sail fast enough to intercept the storms. By 1940, the loss of life and property made it obvious that storm hunters needed a better way to track storms. Major Joseph B. Duckworth, a colonel in the Army Air Corps Reserve and in command of the Instrument Flying Instructor School located in Bryan, Texas, made a bet with the British pilot about the quality of Duckworth's AT-6. Duckworth said that his small airplane was so reliable that he could fly into the hurricane heading towards the Texas area at the time and survive. The British pilot agreed on the deal. So on July 12, 1943, Joseph flew a one-engine AT-6 straight into the eye of a hurricane bound for Galveston, Texas. He faced heavy winds and turbulence that pilots were not familiar with at the time. Duckworth proved that it was possible to safely navigate an airplane through the center of a hurricane. Soon forecasters realized airplanes were a valid way to collect information about the storms. The Army Air Corps started training military pilots to fly into these hurricanes. With World War II in full swing, forecasters were desperate for information on the hurricanes brewing in the Atlantic. The training soon grew into a formal operation that has grown into the airplane reconnaissance that we are familiar with today. Forecasters use the information collected by the airplanes to track and monitor the hurricane's speed, location, and direction. The innovation of the airplanes to track hurricanes greatly impacts society today. forecasters can research all of the components of a hurricane with the information collected. The forecasters use the gathered information to predict the path of a storm and warn the public if they should be in any danger. Forecasters also use the information to compare to hurricane seasons in the past and try to find a seasonal pattern. If there is one, forecasters can prepare for the hurricanes that are most likely to happen and make sure that the public is safe. I got the chance to speak with Mr. Bill Reed. He's the director of the National Hurricane Center in Miami, Florida. Mr. Reed has a bachelor's and a master's degree in science and meteorology from Texas A&M University. He spent 2 years flying airplane reconnaissance during his 4-year service in the United States Navy. After this, he went to work for the National Weather Service as a forecaster in San Antonio. Then he became the lead forecaster for the Galveston-Hudson Bay area prior to becoming director of the National Hurricane Center. Mr. Reed, how did airplanes flying through hurricanes to take measurements change the science of hurricane prediction?
I would say that is one of the major advancements that has led to our understanding of hurricanes and the forecasting thereof.
Are airplanes necessary today? Can forecasters use satellites to track storms and get the information they need?
If you had just satellite and you didn't have the data that's provided by the hurricane, it's kind of like when you go to a medical doctor with some kind of an ailment, and he can look you over and take external measurements of things that are going on with you and say, yeah, I think there's something wrong, but I don't know exactly what it is. If he really thinks there's something wrong, he'll send you in for like an MRI. So you kind of look at what an airplane can do now with all its instruments. It's kind of like our MRI into a hurricane. We get all the detail on the strength, the winds, how big it is, how intense it is, whether it's getting stronger or weaker, and how much so is through those flights.
What is the future of the airplanes that fly into hurricanes?
There's nothing on the horizon that would replace the data quality and quantity that we can get by flying the aircraft into them. The accuracy of knowing the intensity of the storm and the location that we get with an aircraft, if we didn't have them, would be lost to that extent. I think there's a long future in the way we're doing it now, and I think what may be more intriguing in the more farther future is what we might be able to do with unmanned aircraft for adding to the kind of data we get in the future.
I also had the privilege of speaking with Dr. James McFadden. Dr. McFadden is the current Chief of Staff at the Airplane Operations Center, which has 13 aircraft for research flights into hurricane, North American storms, and observing sea animals. Dr. McFadden has a bachelor's degree in geology from Virginia Tech and a PhD in meteorology from the University of Wisconsin. Dr. McFadden, how do Hurricane Hunter aircraft make measurements as they are flying through the storm?
The airplane itself is an instrument. It collects all kinds of data on temperatures, pressures, humidity, measures a number of physical values that are used for the computation of other information. The airplane itself does not measure wind, as most people think. We measure a number of things that go into the computation of the wind. So the airplane itself becomes a wind vane, and it's a very accurate wind vane, and we're able to measure winds with an accuracy of about 1 to 2 knots, which is very, very good for an airplane like that. We have, like I said, the radars on the airplane. We have a lower fuselage radar, which collects important research data for the scientists, and we have the Doppler radar, which is used for generating wind fields within the hurricane. We have a number of things that we drop or launch from the airplanes. We have a dropson.
What is it like to be inside an airplane as it's flying through a hurricane?
Well, it can be kind of ordinary, like when you fly from, in a commercial airliner. You probably had bigger bumps in a commercial airliner than some of the hurricanes we've flown, but by and large, it can be very, very rough.
The use of airplanes to fly through hurricanes by forecasters saves lives by allowing forecasters to report the size, location, intensity, direction, and speed of hurricanes that are out of reach of land-based monitoring devices. From starting out as a simple bet to evolving into a scientific practice, this innovation has definitely changed the way we live as a society today by protecting millions of people and billions of dollars in property. This is, without a doubt, one innovation we cannot live without.